Welcome Chosen X. You have always noticed a subtle alteration in rooms when you arrive, a delicate rearrangement of tone that bends ordinary talk into uneasy silence or sudden intimacy. At first you labeled these episodes social mishaps or peculiar timing. Over time they accumulated into evidence, not random misfires but steady patterns that suggested your presence influenced what others would not disclose. That realization alters familiar explanations. Childhood incidents return framed differently. A look held too long, laughter that softened into apology, secrets slipped without intent. Those moments were not social oddities but early calibrations, private rehearsals for a capacity you did not yet name. You learned to minimize, to ease your edges, to make your comportment small so others could remain comfortable. That economy kept you safe but dulled an instrument needing honing. A change begins in your center, subtle and exacting. You do not seek attention, you simply hold a kind of clarity that invites buried material to move. People shift when you enter a scene because your steadiness reframes their bearings. Some lean in with relief, grateful for the light you make, others tense, gathering defenses around fragile stories. Neither reaction is your failure. Both are evidence of what you reveal. Memory reorganizes into lessons rather than wounds. Solitude that once felt like exile now reads as preparation, a place where perception sharpened while noise faded. While crowds chased applause you cultivated attentive silence, listening for micro-variations in voice and posture that betray concealment or surrender. Those hours of patient observation matured discernment into a reliable faculty. You realize you have been mistaking reflection for fault. When a person recoiled you interpreted it as rejection. When gratitude mingled with fear you thought your compassion had been misread. Now you can see these responses as encounters with exposure. You do not fracture others, you illuminate fissures that already existed. Your perceptive capacity functions more like a tool than a gift. It reads intonations before sentences arrive. It senses directional adjustments in decision-making and maps them like faint currents. That facility is not mere hunch but pattern recognition refined by experience and restraint. You begin to trust it because it consistently points toward useful clarity. Speaking honestly now produces measurable shifts. A concise remark can slow rehearsed narratives and coax truth into clearer syntax. In some people the effect is liberating, in others it triggers retreat. Neither result implicates you in wrongdoing. The important practice is discerning when to hold steady and when to withdraw so that harm does not propagate. Proof comes through recurring confirmations. A chance meeting aligns at the right time. A question you pose resolves long-standing confusion. A feeling of peril vanishes because you asked one unadorned question. Patterns accumulate until skepticism dissolves into trust in your instrument. Accepting who you are requires relinquishing pleasing people. That habit preserved calm but hid potency. Choosing otherwise will feel destabilizing and liberating, like stepping into clear dawn. You will want to preserve the tender parts that hide, welcome them kindly even as you refuse their limitations. Tests will follow. A friend may unfold a truth that demands a steadier posture. A colleague might force structural honesty into a common space. A stranger may confess frailty that asks you to be both witness and ballast. These moments are not performances, they measure how well you keep your center while mountains shift. Allies will appear, those whose silence signals depth rather than emptiness. They arrive as unexpected confirmations of mutual bearing. Meet them with the same clear modesty you cultivate inwardly. Do not mistake their arrival for vanity. Treat their presence as a partnership in which steadiness can be reciprocated. Resistance will persist. Many will prefer the comfort of their unrevised scripts. They may urge you back into old tolerances. Your task is to remain available without losing composure, to offer an uncomplicated mirror without inviting scapegoating. Be gentle with former selves that retreated to survive. They navigated constrained conditions with skill and courage. Now that preparation completes, extend gratitude to those strategies and then choose differently in moments that require more clarity and fidelity. A horizon opens as practice rather than destination. You will be asked to speak plainly, to hold truth, and to carry steady attention. The work is patient fidelity, a tenderness that refuses shortcuts. Begin here with measured breath and steady posture. Your presence is not a hazard, it is a mechanism for disclosure and repair. Embrace that function with humility. By doing so, you offer others a chance to meet themselves and reclaim space that is yours. Stay. You move forward from the moment that altered how rooms bent toward your presence. The world around you carries subtle biographies written in posture and breath. Each face recites a private script that you learn to follow because your attention settles into the pauses between sentences. What others pass off as timing or mood reveals itself to you as a chain of small admissions. People perform civility while secret inclinations arc in softer trajectories. When you notice those arcs, they read like weather charts that forecast shifts long before anyone names them. In crowded spaces, a thin film of chatter settles across the room and you learn to see through that membrane. You trace tiny delays that foreshadow falsehood and you detect the micro-relaxations that precede confession. Those small movements collect into patterns that feel like currents. One evening you will cross a plaza and gather so many of those tremors that a past misunderstanding resolves without exchange. The path itself becomes a ledger that registers intention. This clarity does not function as an accusation. It operates as a careful instrument. Your perception isolates pressure points in conversation and shows where tenderness can be offered with minimal harm. Over time you learn to calibrate voice and gesture so your interjections do not fracture fragile trust. The most effective adjustments are economical and precise. One quiet question placed inside a knot of rumor can steer an entire trajectory more effectively than verbose correction. You observe people who habitually soften near you, as those seeking refuge. They lower their performance and slow their cadence. Their gaze finds the space close to yours because your presence raises the cost of pretense. You do not require confessions. You arrange conditions where authenticity is easier than fabrication. Elsewhere you encounter those whose defenses harden like old varnish. They provide rehearsed answers or laugh to scatter the discomfort lodged under their ribs. In such moments you remain steady. Sometimes the defenses yield like brittle lacquer dissolving under solvent. Other times the walls thicken. Both outcomes are instructions about relational thresholds. Long-standing friendships serve as laboratories for these lessons. People return to familiar roles during reunions. Someone who once admired your steadiness might have learned to shape choices around your rhythm. Others imitate your silence or imitate your phrasing to fit without inviting transformation. Over time these imitations calcify into habits that blind some companions to their own agency. You begin to keep modest inventories of relational patterns. You notice who borrows courage from your comportment, who leans under calm to support ambition, and who withdraws when sincerity is required. These inventories are not verdicts. They are practical maps that guide how you allocate attention. Departures are not always betrayals. Many are necessary resets that allow both people to move into truer alignment. As this work deepens, responsibility extends beyond private boundaries. You handle disclosures with an ethic of containment. When someone collapses under the weight of truth, you do not rush to fix. You offer a quiet vessel that can hold a tremor until coherence returns. In those instances you are a temporary topography that permits interior maps to be redrawn. At times you feel the urge to lead people quickly toward relief. Those impulses teach restraint. Acceleration can shorten difficult, necessary processes. Healing often requires grief and slow recalibration rather than clever maneuvers. You accept that presence is frequently the most potent intervention available. Your discernment alters how you approach conflict. Instead of imposing answers, you unweave threads to reveal source points. You learn to name small, true causes that sustain destructive cycles. Naming is liberatory. When a root is spoken, the foliage of performance often sheds itself with surprising ease. A steady paradox emerges. Your presence destabilizes certain narratives while stabilizing others. That polarity demands moral clarity. You adopt practices that honor consent and protect limits. You become intentional about when to speak and when to hold silence. The rhythm becomes a craft that preserves your integrity and honors the dignity of those who come near. Through these refinements, a quiet ethic forms. You measure impact not by spectacle but by fidelity to process. Incremental shifts carried over time remake landscapes more deeply than abrupt disruptions. You resist the temptation to engineer insight and instead cultivate a hospitable field in which revelation arises organically. People sense this refined manner of moving even when they cannot name it. Some read your steady comportment as authority, others interpret it as a kind of luminous restraint. Those who seek more of it draw closer. Those who fear it recede. Both reactions clarify the shape of your circle. People noticeably. You have reached a depth that is not produced by circumstance but by slow accumulation, a refinement of attention that organizes the raw material of life into discernible patterns. Memory places itself in precise relation to current perception so that what once felt like random friction now reads as deliberate instruction. This is a story of patient formation. The interior geometry that guided your childhood has assembled into coherence. As you attend, the world offers you lines of context that were previously invisible. A pause between words becomes a hinge that opens into motive. A habitual laugh reveals a compensation that has held for decades. Your capacity turns minor gestures into readable documents, and you find that the smallest alteration in phrasing can shift the trajectory of a conversation. That economy of influence becomes a primary tool for tending to other people's interior economies without exploiting them. You practice restraint as generosity. When someone unloads a sudden confession, you do not try to repair swiftly or to narrate a grand resolution. You allow the moment to maintain its proportional size. Preserving scale honors healing. Each time you refuse the urge to dramatize, you allow authenticity its own breathing room, and this restraint paradoxically increases the likelihood of durable change. Through this work you also encounter the unseen costs of clarity. People who have built livelihoods on performance can feel threatened by a presence that reduces illusion to obviousness. Their reactions sometimes turn sharp, weaponizing discomfort to reclaim control. In those instances you learn to reroute attention away from personal attack and towards structural understanding. You name the pattern, and in naming you reduce its power. The practice of naming becomes an ethical instrument when used with humility. Calling out a pattern is not a verdict but a map. It shows where labor has been misapplied and where resources of courage might be better invested. People often respond with resistance at first, not because they are wrong but because the map unsettles a route they had counted on. Your role is to present options without coercion so that agency remains intact. You find yourself cultivating thresholds where truth can be practiced safely. These are small rituals of agreement that prepare people to meet facts without falling into shame. A shared breath, a pause for consent, a simple recognition of intent can turn exposure into repair. Over time these thresholds become a civil grammar for the exchanges you steward. There are seasons when the field around you thickens with unresolved material and you must practice selective availability. Too much openness at once produces fatigue and can seed reactivity. You learn to distribute presence according to capacity, not according to desire. This distribution feels like stewardship rather than scarcity because it protects the conditions under which authentic encounters can occur. Parallel to these practical measures is a deeper inquiry into the nature of your own apprehension. You meditate on how your sensitivities were shaped by family histories and cultural templates. You trace impulses and find some are inherited survival strategies that no longer serve growth. Once identified, they can be revised with care rather than erased with shame. Revision is a delicate kind of mourning. You grieve the parts of yourself that once saved you and then fold gratitude into the process of letting go. That gratitude converts absence into a source of strength and prevents the hollow triumph that sometimes accompanies abrupt renunciation. Your work is therefore generative rather than punitive. As you sharpen practices, you notice how synchronicities rearrange to support intention. Conversations align with needs, doors open at rhythmically meaningful moments, and allies present themselves in timely relation to tasks. These alignments are not magic but follow clearer perception and steadier motion. You recognize them as confirmations rather than demands. Finally, you learn to translate your field into language that others can hear. The most transformational phrases you use are concise, concrete, and offered with invitation. You do not preach insight, but you make it available. The power you cultivate is not spectacle, it is a capacity for practical clarity that others can borrow without diminishing your supply. Hold this season as an apprenticeship. There will be tests that check your fidelity to these practices, and there will be losses that clarify attachment. The work calls for patience, for rigorous kindness, and for a humility that understands power as responsibility. Keep the compass of your attention true, and the path will continue to widen in ways that are both evident and quiet. Trust the method. Small consistent acts of clarity will widen your arena. Now, you step into a season where outward events register your inner shifts with clear reciprocity. The environments that once allowed complacency now rearrange themselves to match the steadiness you embody, and then measure whether you can hold that alignment. Minor moments become revealing instruments. A brief exchange shows where credibility matters. A small motion exposes whether allegiance is genuine. You learn to read gatherings as textiles whose worn strands indicate where mending is required. Rooms that previously accommodated scripts now respond differently. Some people move closer and offer sudden commitments that have been dormant. Others recoil as if conserving fragile interiors. Those who approach transparency do so because your presence raises the price of pretense. Those who retreat do so because exposure demands resources they lack. The field you generate clarifies competence without moralizing. Timing grows into a craft you must master. Interventions require attunement to readiness. Entering too early can provoke collapse. Waiting too long allows repair opportunities to drift away. Learning how to arrive with the right measure of curiosity and restraint becomes a refined skill that balances patience with initiative. Relationships reconfigure as truths surface. Certain partnerships deepen and shed artifice, while others dissolve under pressure. You regard these transitions as structural reordering rather than indictments. The world is creating room for alignment between intention and response, and that realignment involves both gain and loss. Stewardship becomes part of your remit. You begin to shape shared containers where disclosure can be practiced safely. Small protocols you introduce are simple yet stabilizing. An explicit invitation to speak, a moment of synchronized breath, a clarifying question that separates rumor from fact. These gestures protect dignity and make repair feasible without spectacle. More opportunities appear that mirror the virtues you have cultivated. Openings that once seemed random now follow discernible patterns. Offers arrive that match your capacity for calm and care. Each new possibility tests whether steadiness is habitual or performative. Acting from habit sustains the field, while performative responses create brittle outcomes. Beware of conflating influence with domination. Power without reciprocity corrodes trust. When influence risks becoming coercive, you withdraw energy until mutual consent is restored. This practice safeguards both your integrity and the autonomy of others, preventing your presence from becoming a force that overwhelms rather than invites. An ethic of repair enters common language. When harm becomes visible, you name it plainly and propose proportional steps for reconstitution. Accountability functions as restoration rather than punishment. Agreements that restore possibility and inhibit recurrence form a durable scaffold for healthier interaction. Institutions respond differently than individuals. Organizational mechanisms seek stability and may attempt to incorporate new dynamics by reshaping roles or introducing containment. Navigate these systemic responses with clear communication and measured patience. Preserve your boundaries while participating in broader adaptation. You develop a practice of translation that converts felt impressions into accessible directives. You map interior cues to practical tasks so people can respond without shame. The better your translation, the less your insight resembles prophecy and the more it functions as a navigational tool. Protect your thresholds. Environmental intensity can accumulate in blunt responsiveness. Rituals of replenishment are not luxury, they are essential maintenance. Retreat into chosen solitude to recharge, then return with the capacity to hold others without depletion. Across seasons you observe modest cultural shifts. Communities begin to privilege depth over surface acts and attentive listening over rhetorical briskness. Now, the alignment of inner discipline and outer consequence becomes increasingly evident. Persistent commitment to truthfulness reshapes relationships and opens possibilities that better fit your capacity and purpose. Doors that once seemed sealed reveal corridors suited to your steady presence. Proceed with disciplined courage. Keep speech precise and reception tender. Your ability to hold paradoxes without rushing to judgment will stand as one of your most consequential contributions. When you sustain that balance, the changes around you are less dramatic and more infrastructural, building a field where honesty and care coexist with effectiveness. Treat this phase as ongoing practice rather than a temporary test. The habits you form now will organize later possibilities. Your influence will radiate through slow, consistent work, converting transient insight into collective competence. Maintain course and allow systems to adapt to the integrity you carry. You arrive at an opening that feels like the hinge of a long contained season, an aperture where private understanding and outward possibility align. The shape of your life tightens toward meaning and then relaxes into a field that was preparing for your arrival. Now you are asked to hold insight and to embody a posture that invites others to move, repair, and choose anew. Small decisions build a vocabulary of effect. Ordinary moments become instruments of influence. Your presence shifts from inward calibration to a public mechanism that shapes how people arrange attention. You preserve scale so revelation can unfold without spectacle. That care grants those who meet you permission to reveal fragile truths and to find resources they had not trusted. You are not a fixer. You are a keeper of steadiness who lets truth resolve itself in time. Certain passages ahead ask for courage as measured action. There will be a temptation to protect everyone by shouldering burdens or smoothing edges. That impulse comes from gratitude and compassion, yet it can also hide a need to be needed. Learn to tell apart service that preserves integrity from service that fosters dependence. When you agree to help, align the assistance with clarity and mutual responsibility. Encounters will deepen and some relationships will clear as necessary. Those that endure will be reformed around reciprocity and honest exchange. Others will fall away because they relied on expectations instead of reciprocal openness. This pruning is not punishment. It is preparation that allows new growth. Trust attrition when it preserves the direction you are learning to inhabit. You are called to craft spaces where honesty can be practiced without collapse. Design simple agreements that scaffold vulnerability. A shared pause before a hard exchange can recalibrate power and reduce shame. A practiced invitation to speak plainly can turn a fearful confession into a step toward repair. These agreements create a grammar others can learn and pass on. As your sense of calling clarifies, practical alignments follow. Time and energy begin to move toward activities that sustain clarity and away from those that erode it. This reconfiguration touches daily rituals as much as public projects. Protecting attention becomes stewardship. Schedule quiet. Maintain boundaries around what you will carry, and treat rest as essential for moral acuity. Systems may respond by trying to contain your steadiness. Organizations prefer predictability and may attempt assimilation. When that happens, translate institutional responses into relational language so people see how changes honor dignity rather than hide care behind procedure. Hold practices that preserve human attention even when systems invite compromise. Moments of doubt will test the ease of old patterns. Use them as invitations to ritual. Record a brief note about a recent clarity, offer a formative book, or secure solitude for reflection. These small acts build durable capacity. They sustain serious work more than dramatic measures. As influence widens, practice generosity and limits. Teach tools that scale like questions that invite reflection rather than answers that create reliance. The aim is not to gather followers but to expand ambient competence. When you teach another to notice nuance, you multiply conditions for flourishing. Keep an inner witness to check zeal against humility. Invite trusted critique and test proposals before acting. Calibration prevents conviction from becoming coercion. Let leadership be reciprocal trust where listening matters as much as instruction. Rituals accelerate transformation when they tether vision to habit. Quiet markers that signify an ending or a beginning align hearts and re-establish rhythm. Use these moments to translate aims into practice so people can grasp change in daily life. Near the close of this movement, you will sense an invitation that is both private and public. It asks you to continue the work beyond word into ongoing practice. At the center of your screen, a short film will appear that continues this sequence with guided steps for deep listening and practical activation. Watch it in a quiet place, let its cadence settle into your breath, and let its guidance move you from reflection into modest action. Consider subscribing and enabling notifications to receive future guided sequences as they are released. The film continues this teaching with concrete practices that cultivate steadiness, refine the language of truth, and rehearse consent and repair so you can return to daily life equipped with durable tools. Use it with calm care. Always. Return to these practices regularly and invite others to join now. Accept this phase as living initiation. The aim is durable change rather than theatrical reveal. Move with deliberate softness and precise intent. Every modest act of clarity accrues into a life capable of holding more truth and inviting others to do the same. Continue with patient boldness and know that the field you cultivate will shape possibilities you have not yet imagined.